Number 4. A fourth historical fact is this, that there were multiple eyewitnesses to the resurrected Jesus. Multiple eyewitnesses saw Jesus after his crucifixion, after his burial, and therefore, we would presume, after his resurrection. The first people to find the tomb empty and bring news to his disciples, in the gospel accounts anyway, were women. Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, they had come to the tomb basically to anoint the body of Jesus. They had not had an opportunity to properly prepare his body for burial, because after the crucifixion there was a rush because of the special Sabbath day prior to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So they were coming back on the first available opportunity to finish preparing his body for the tomb. In the first century, Tim Keller, in his book The Reason for God, points out that in the first century, women were not necessarily highly regarded. A woman's word, for example, would not be admissible in a court of law if she were to stand as a witness. And yet, again, somewhat counterintuitively, Matthew and the other gospel writers have no trouble reporting that the first people to testify that Jesus' tomb was found empty were women, and they were eyewitnesses to him being risen. As Mary was in the garden there surrounding the tomb where he was buried, Jesus came to her, appeared to him. She mistook him at first to be the gardener, that is the keeper of the garden there. And yet she came to recognize who he was, that he was in fact Jesus. His disciples, who saw him in a closed door meeting as they were meeting in fear from the Roman authorities. But there were multiple eyewitnesses. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15, and again, the letter to 1 Corinthians here, probably early to mid-50s AD. So you're talking about 20 to 25 years after the crucifixion and therefore the resurrection. Paul says that Jesus was seen by Peter, so Peter saw him, James saw him, the apostles all together as a group saw him, so the 11 apostles that remained after Judas had defected saw Jesus. And then Paul says this, Paul says that he was seen of above 500 brethren at once. Now 500 people seeing the same thing, that is not a hallucination that has ever been known in the history of psychology. 500 people at once. And Paul says after that, of whom the greater part remain unto this present. That is, of those 500 people who were there at that meeting where they saw the resurrected Jesus, many of those, Paul says, were still living when he wrote 1 Corinthians. In effect, what Paul is saying is that, hey, if you have questions about whether or not Jesus actually rose from the dead, I've got some names and addresses I can give you if you want to go talk to them and verify it. So Paul was convinced that Jesus had risen from the dead, and Paul knew people who were at that mass meeting who saw the resurrected Jesus there at once. Not to mention his disciples who saw him over a period of 40 days as he continued to teach. Acts chapter 1 tells us about that. Multiple eyewitnesses to the resurrected Jesus are recorded.